There's certainly a lot to dig into, but sort of when you add it all together and look at it holistically, it seems like today, especially, Richard, that there have been a lot of mixed messages about the duration of this war and when it comes to Israel and the U.S., what exactly the end game is.
Well, two things, Katie. One is Israel and the United States are not necessarily, they're not on the same page. Israel is prepared to fight a long-duration war. It continues to see all sorts of positives and further diminishing the capacity of Iran to rebuild its military, to really do a lot. Israel wants, I won't say an open-ended war, but a long-duration war. I think the United States has increasingly come around to the point of view is we're not well-positioned to withstand that. That the economic pain of the war is going to grow for us, the military costs of the war are growing for us, and we would like to bring this to an end. The problem with the U.S. position is it only took one to start the war, us, but it's going to take three to end it. And that's mean, first of all, the United States is going to have to, shall we say, lean on Israel, to be blunt, to bring the war to an end sooner than the Prime Minister wants. Even more difficult is the United States is going to have to persuade Iran to bring a war to this war to an end. And that I think is going to be the biggest challenge for this president, who increasingly wants to wrap this up, declare victory, declare mission accomplished. But again, he doesn't have the power to do that. He's got to bring Iran around.
Yeah, it's really interesting, too, when you think about how this war is being perceived in different parts of the world, because recent polling shows that certainly a minority of Americans support the action in Iran, whereas you compare what we're seeing in Israel, for example, the reception there, Richard, this has widespread support, maybe also due to the fact that Israel is just physically a lot closer to Iran than where we're sitting in the United States.
Your assessment's spot on. It's far more popular in Israel than it is here. Indeed, in Israel, which is a country that's divided about just about any and every issue you can think of, this is one of the few issues where there's a pretty good consensus. But Israel is largely set apart from all sorts of global economic consequences. The Israeli public favors this war. The public here, over 60%? Is against it. They want the president to be focusing on affordability. The Europeans and our allies there and in Asia, look at their stock markets. Look at the cost of energy. They are increasingly uncomfortable. The Arab countries, a lot of them are unhappy. They weren't consulted about this, and they're bearing the brunt. It's their oil installations, potentially their water treatment centers that are going to be attacked by Iran. So there's a real disconnect here. And again, the pressure to end this war is going to grow, but that very desire gives the Iranian leadership leverage.
And I am curious about that leverage. There's been a lot of speculation as to whether the U.S. would at least try to walk away from this, not so much in the sense of the traditional military sense, but the idea that the president, might just have other priorities and decide, okay, enough's enough. If that were the case, not saying the U.S. would completely pull out, like what would you actually need to create stability there? The presumption is that Israel can't do it on its own. Would the Arab states maybe step up in some sort of cohesive way? I know they don't necessarily all cooperate now, but is there some potential for cooperation in order to sort of try to bring some stability back to that area?
It all depends upon what Iran's demands are. Iran will continue to have, for example, drones that they could use. It's going to be very hard to insure tankers going through the Straits of Hormuz. So the question is, what will Iran's demands be, and who's going to pay them? What if Iran says we want to have economic sanctions reduced or relieved? What if they say, this is not inconceivable, they're going to say it, what about reparations and so forth? So and then there's going to be debates about their military rebuilding, about their nuclear program. All this is going to suddenly reemerge on the agenda, potentially as the cost of bringing this war to an end. And it's not clear to me that this administration, the Trump administration, much less others, have thought through what is it they're prepared to do to bring this war to an end.
I am also curious about the nuclear issue, which seems to be not really being talked about at all. I don't know what their capabilities were heading into this war a week or so ago, but is there any sort of risk that there is any facilities or, more importantly, uranium or anything else that could potentially be fall into the wrong hands?
The answer is yes. You've got a significant amount of enriched uranium, not enriched to the level you need for a nuclear explosive device, but significantly enriched, reportedly a large amount in the area of the city of Isfahan. So that in and of itself could create a dirty bomb, a nuclear event if it got into the wrong hands. Also, if someone got a hold of it who actually knew how to further enrich uranium, it could be a nightmare. So I would think, just like that was part of the negotiations before this war began 2-3 weeks ago, I expect it's going to become, yet again, part of the conversation between the United States and Iran. What will be the disposition or the fate of that uranium? There's talk about even, in the out there conversation of the United States sending in special forces to try to get physical control of that. I would just say that would be extraordinarily difficult and dangerous operation to undertake. But that is one of the many unresolved issues here.
And Richard, at what point, over what timeline would you expect that diplomacy actually does start to play a role here? Because President Trump has said that he's open to talking to Iran. The administration officials have also said as much in the past day or so. Iran, though, does not seem to share that sentiment, to put it mildly. So at what point do you think that we actually do see some of those discussions happening between these two sides?
Well, you've put your finger on a big problem. It's not going to happen fast enough or quick enough. The economic effects are going to mushroom in this country and around the world. And the idea that you could negotiate an entire new package between the United States and Iran quickly or soon enough to alleviate the economic problems, I think is far-fetched. So you may have to do this in phases. And again, we're at an extraordinarily difficult point. The single biggest variable right now is the duration of this war. And we've got a problem. We want to bring it to a close. Iran sees leverage in that, and I think that is the biggest area of friction going forward. And Iran is in a position where it can continue to make the United States and the world pay if this war continues.
I am curious, though, Richard, and particularly about the U.S. strategy. And I know there's a lot of speculation that there wasn't a whole lot of planning leading up to this. But I think back to the Gulf Wars, primarily under George W. Bush, with Iraq and Afghanistan, and just how many military ships, U.S. naval ships that we saw in the Persian Gulf, not just necessarily to protect whatever cargo was coming out of the Persian Gulf, but also to protect some of the other Arab states and the folks there. There's no visibility, at least from what we know publicly right now, of that presence. And I am wondering if maybe that in and of itself could potentially help to just have more of that military presence rather than just, flying over and, dropping bombs and missiles.
Look, you're right. The presence compared to what we had in the Gulf War, 1990-91, as well as in the Iraq War, it's small. But there's no amount of presence that can necessarily keep the straits open if you have periodic attacks. Tankers are vulnerable. The last time we escorted vessels was, close to 40, 50 years ago. Again, an awfully difficult kind of operation. No, what you put your finger on is in some ways the lack of planning here, or to the extent planning happened, it was predicated on all sorts of optimistic assumptions about how this war would go and the potential for regime change in Iran and so forth. And it's not working out that way. And we're now in the very awkward situation where, again, we've launched something and we want to bring it to a close. Yeah. Iran senses that, and they're going to try to use that to get some economic or political gain from the United States. We're going to have to make some tough decisions.